Hello everyone, this is the Human Mechanism. I typically review vehicles, but I also want to take time to review figures, especially this one. Now, I talk a lot of trash about G.I. Joe, usually in regards to the direction being taken by Hasbro. However, I'm going to be real here. It's my favorite toy line of all time. So today, we're going to be taking a look at something I've been wanting to review for a while. This is the G.I. Joe Pursuit of Cobra Cobra Shock Trooper. I consider the Pursuit of Cobra line to be the peak of modern G.I. Joe figures and vehicles. I'm not necessarily saying that things got worse after the POC line, at least, not immediately. But I didn't feel that things ever went above and beyond the standard set by Pursuit of Cobra. Now, I usually don't talk about packaging, but I will say this. It's gorgeous, and it shows the figure off very well. It makes you want to keep the figure inside the package. But you all know me. Here he is. The first interesting thing I'd like to point out is that the look of the figure isn't exactly screaming shock trooper. In fact, he doesn't even look like a soldier in general. He looks more like a SWAT team member, or another form of special law enforcement. Even just an examination of his loadout points towards this, as opposed to being the forefront of an invasion force. An MP5, a once popular weapon among SWAT teams, a Franchi 12 gauge, a weapon currently used exclusively in the US by SWAT teams, an AK-47, even though not of American origin, assault rifles are not a rare sight among SWAT teams, and surely special law enforcement units around the world would deploy the AK. However, the two main indications of the shock trooper being law enforcement instead of a military unit are, first, this riot shield, which is just great. I could do without the Cobra logo, but I guess everyone's favorite terrorist organization has never been known for subtlety. And second is this taser, a ubiquitous weapon used by law enforcement all over the world. The taser itself is so well sculpted you can even identify the real-world weapon it's based on. It appears to be an X-26 by the looks of it, so he might in fact fit in as a soldier. But in my G.I. Joe universe, this guy is going to be law enforcement. And if you were to make, say, a G.I. Joe police force, this figure would be indispensable. Other accessories include a gas mask, goggles, a walkie-talkie, electroshock batons, and a sledgehammer. The same one used for the Pursuit of Cobra Vamp, because why not? His vest is also removable, but I'm not going to bother removing it. Now, let's move on to the figure itself. The molded detailing and proportions are spectacular, absolutely spot on. This is about as close to model quality as you're possibly going to get without actually being a model. I stopped collecting G.I. Joes around the age of 12, just when the 25th anniversary Joe line was about to commence. My last image of G.I. Joe were those bulky proportioned figures from the direct-to-consumer line. So you can only imagine my surprise when I started collecting G.I. Joe figures again as an adult, and saw just how much things had changed. Pursuit of Cobra was the first G.I. Joe line I started collecting after my hiatus ended in 2013. For me, this was when G.I. Joe actually started to feel realistic, largely due to the proportions of the figures. I wasn't just collecting toys anymore, I was collecting small people. Now, one of the main selling points of the POC line was the ability to customize figures and vehicles as much as possible without actually altering them. The Shock Trooper is no exception. Though he has less customization options than, say, the Alley Viper, he can be equipped for differing scenarios. Like most modern Joes, Articulation was a major upgrade from the earlier generations of G.I. Joe figures. Points of articulation? Too many to count. Bottom line, the figures are really damn poseable. So, are there any gripes I have? There are a few. Some are not exclusive to the Shock Trooper, but they're worth pointing out. The hands have a pretty wide array of articulation. However, moving such a small component really makes me nervous. But that's just me. The last gripe I have are the accessories. Not the type of accessories per se, but rather the size and amount of accessories. Now, the customization options come at a cost, and that's the increase in the number of accessories, which also increases the difficulty in keeping track of them. Some modern figures had it worse than others, but if you thought some of the vintage figures came with small, easy-to-lose parts, then you probably haven't bought many modern figures. I would say the smaller bits on the Shock Trooper to look out for are the walkie-talkie, the goggles, and the taser. Fortunately, the smaller bits can be attached to his body or other parts of equipment, and if not, you can probably improvise ways of doing so. So, overall, I say this with no exaggeration. This figure exemplifies G.I. Joe at its best. The Pursuit of Cobra Shock Trooper is equally a fantastic figure as it is an army builder. This is a figure that you can't have just one of. You need to have several of them in order to complete the visual story, so to speak, especially considering that the Shock Trooper is part of an invasion force. Unfortunately, patience is a virtue with army building and collecting G.I. Joes in general nowadays, considering figures alone can cost more than a car payment. But that's not a knock against the figure itself. This is a top-of-the-line piece. Highly recommended all around. So with that said, this is the Human Mechanism, and the G.I. Joe Pursuit of Cobra Shock Trooper has the Human Mechanism's seal of approval. See you all later.